Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Designing People-Friendly Spaces, Keeping Occupants Healthy, Safe, and Comfortable. I'm your moderator, Jocelyn Fagan. On average, Americans spend 93% of our lives indoors, and as we work toward a more sustainable world, our homes and buildings become ever more tightly sealed, laying the foundation for a potentially dangerous indoor environments. As a result, our exposure to chemicals is 10 times greater indoors than outdoors. Creating healthy indoor spaces requires a balanced approach, not only during the design and construction phases, but also in regard to the long-term maintenance of the space. Today, we are joined by a panel of industry experts who will present on the many ways in which architects and designers can create people-friendly spaces, what that means to our panelists, and how indoor air quality factors into that definition. We will also examine the challenges that architects and designers may face when addressing people-friendly design and indoor air quality, as well as the materials being used and how the flooring industry is helping lead the way toward a safer and more sustainable buildings. Now I would like to introduce you to our panelists. Juliet Boker. Juliet is an associate and senior interior project designer at Perkins & Will. She has over 25 years of experience in a broad range of corporate, retail, healthcare, laboratory, and educational environments. Juliet's design philosophy stems from an understanding that good design has the power to improve lives and propel businesses. Her design is focused on sustainable design practice that merge corporate strategies with the health and well-being of building concepts. Juliet balances her work with a love of photography, hiking, and cooking. Thank you for joining us today, Juliet.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Next, we are joined by Allison Facer. Allison leads TroJB's seasoned and technically advanced group of interior designers. Through early integration with her fellow architects and engineers, she is responsible for shaping the interior experience. Allison has an extensive experience in all phases of interior planning design process and the creation of master plan standards in the healthcare industry. She has more than 25 years of interior design and management experience in healthcare-related facilities. She is committed to design excellence on every project. Thank you for being here, Allison.
Thank you.
Next, I would like to introduce Diane Martell. Diane Martell is Vice President, Environmental Planning and Strategy for Tarkett North America and is responsible for driving the company's sustainable messaging, programs, initiatives, education, training, and industry awareness. Diane's career with the Tarkett Group began in 1988 when she joined its Domco business. In 2003, Diane took a leadership role in Tarkett's sustainable initiatives, spearheading the development of the company's Restart Reclamation and Recycling program, which was designed to address the recycling of product samples, installation waste, and installed flooring materials in the commercial market. Diane has also worked with the company's product team to develop and redesign existing products to reduce LLC and chemical use and introduce new environmentally responsible products. Diane is a member of the Resilient Floor Covering Institute for Tarkett. She also served as a member of NSF 332 Committee for developing a sustainable product standard and ASTM E60 on sustainability. Diane holds 3 bachelor degrees in education, arts, and marketing from Montreal University and the University of Quebec. Thank you for being here, Diane.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Sandra Sorcy. Sandy currently serves as the Director of Healthcare Strategy and Interior Design with Giorgio Associates Incorporated. With more than 20 years of healthcare design experience, Sandy's role on the team is twofold. As Director of Interior Design, she is responsible for providing complete interior planning and design services. This includes development of standards, programs for finishes and furnishings. With an extensive healthcare background, Sandy designs projects that are user-centered and based on the principles of evidence-based design. And with a focus on addressing the vision of project goals for the owner-user group, she partners these goals with improved patient satisfaction, safety, staff productivity, and retention. Addressing indoor air quality and sustainability along with color theory, wayfinding, and healing art rounds out the package. As the Director of Healthcare Strategy, Sandy assists the team with visioning, programming, and planning to ensure the functionality, flexibility, and mission as the owner-user group. As a lead AP, EDAC, NCIDQ credentialed professional, Sandy understands the organizational culture in healthcare environments. With a passion for giving back, Sandy discovered her passion for healthcare early on in her career. The mission is simple: create sustainable, user-focused solutions that foster healing with the principles of EBD, LEAD, and LEAN to promote a positive, welcoming, comfortable environment for patients, caregivers, and family members. Thank you for joining today, Sandy.
My pleasure.
And last but not least, I would like to introduce Mike Trinket. Mike is Senior Vice President of External Affairs for the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, a consumer and patient advocacy organization serving more than 60 million people with asthma and allergies. AAFA is also the oldest and largest asthma and allergy patient organization in the U.S. Mike is responsible for communications and development of AAFA, including the Foundation's Asthma and Allergy Friendly Certification Program, an initiative to scientifically assess household products to help families with asthma and allergies find the most suitable products. He has written and edited articles for consumer health magazines such as Health Monitor, Coping Magazine, Allergic, Living Magazine, and Asthma Magazine, as well as for medical periodicals such as the Annals of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, and the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology. Mike is the spokesperson for AAFA and has been invited to speak about healthy homes by CNN, USA Today, The Wall Street Journal, The Washington Post, Health Day, WebMD, and other major media. He holds a Master of Science degree from Johns Hopkins University, a Certificate of Advanced Studies in International Business from Georgetown University, and a Bachelor of Science degree from Mary Washington College. Thanks so much for being here today, Mike.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Now let's get started with our presentations. Mike, we'll begin with you.
Great, thanks. Well, I have the honor of being part of this great panel. I'm so pleased to be invited and glad to be of service. And what makes it most fun for me is I get to talk about the people that all of us care about the most, which is really the end users of all the services and the products that you all provide. And that is families. Families who are living with asthma and allergies, but even families who aren't, who just want a better indoor air quality and better quality of life. A little bit about AFA. You already know we're a patient advocacy organization, so we represent the patients. We don't represent the doctors or the pharmaceutical companies, but we represent those people who are actually living with this disease every single day. And we've been doing it since 1953. This is actually our 60th anniversary this year. So you might say we've been involved in a healthy home before anybody ever even coined the term, because having a healthy environment has always been a very important part of asthma and allergy care. So we can go to the next slide. So it kind of begs the question, well, what is asthma and what are allergies, and what makes somebody's respiratory system healthy or not healthy? Because this ultimately is a great foundation for why making sure that our spaces are healthy is an important thing to do. So you can see from this illustration, if you look on the left-hand side, you see what is generally a healthy lung. You see these wide open airways that air can get in and out of. You'll notice that the outer circle of that airway is smooth muscle. That those big bronchioles leading into the lungs are actually big round muscles and smooth muscles that constrict and expand to help get air in and out of your lungs. And then on the inside there is just a layer of a certain kind of skin that's very, very sensitive. And in this, if you look at the lung on the right-hand side, that is what happens after an asthma attack has begun. What happens is those muscles around the tubes bringing air into the lungs become very tight and constricted, the same way as if you tightened your fist. And then the lining, inside those airways become very inflamed, the same way your nose gets inflamed when you have a cold or a flu. And then the third insult, if you will, to that injury of the asthma attack is your lungs start to produce mucus, which then further occlude and block the ability of air to get into the lungs. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look from one side to the other why asthma becomes a real problem when your lungs get all closed up, you can't breathe. Well, it just so happens that no matter what environment a human walks into, they're breathing substances, particles, or chemicals into their lungs. And if you already have asthma, which is a chronic inherited disease of the airways leading into the lungs, if you already have a highly hypersensitive airway, you can imagine now, you can sort of see here visually why your asthma might flare up, because you're already hypersensitive to these very sensitive issues. Next slide. So as you've already heard, asthma simply affects a lot of people. There are about 25 million Americans who have asthma. It's the #1 chronic disease among kids. It's the #4 chronic disease among adults. And over 50 million people have some type of allergy. And we get that 60 million number there because there's in the Venn diagram between asthma and allergies, there's a lot of overlap. It's estimated that about 80% of people who have asthma also have allergies. And it becomes very complex when you start turning the microscope up a little bit more, because a lot of asthma attacks are actually triggered by allergic triggers. And some of them are triggered by non-allergic triggers and chemicals. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But for the most part, it's an important illustration that you see a huge percentage of the people that ultimately you serve or that are existing in the spaces you create are living with this disease, with one of these diseases. Next slide. So the idea of controlling our environment is something very germane to the asthma and allergy patient. In fact, it's encoded right in the clinical guidelines for asthma care. It's not just about measuring the clinical measures, or it's not just about the medications, it's not just about making sure that mom and dad and the patient are well educated. Those are good. But the fourth pillar of the National Institute of Health guidelines for asthma care pulls out very clearly the importance of controlling environmental factors. So next slide. So what are those environmental factors? What are the things that give somebody with asthma or allergies some concern when they look at an indoor space? Well, let's look at the right column first, because those are things that many people just naturally understand. Irritants such as smoke, strong fumes, pollution, chemicals, petroleum products, VOCs. These are things we all know about and are familiar with and are resident throughout the house and other environments as well. So there's no question that even for a healthy person, strong concentrations of these types of things can cause irritation in the nose, in the eyes, in the lungs. So it's not a far stretch of the imagination to recognize how then for somebody who has asthma, this could be even more of a problem. So a lot of people are not really as familiar with is the other category of triggers, which are allergens. These are protein-based particles of any nature. I mean, there are billions of different types of proteins on Earth. Pretty much any protein could potentially be an allergen if a person has an allergy to it. But some of the most common indoor allergens are things like dust mites, cat and dog dander, pollen from trees, grass, and weeds that may make their way inside. Even natural oils and other organics, for example, because allergies aren't just things things that happen to the lungs, but it's also could be allergies to your skin, allergies to your eyes, things like that. So when we think about families living with asthma and allergies in a quote unquote healthy home, we're not only talking about these irritants, but we're also talking about these allergens, which makes it a pretty unique, and part of the work we do at the Allergy Foundation, unique. Next slide, please. Now, where can these irritants and these allergens be found? Everywhere. So if you let's look at this illustration of a home, and I know I'm preaching to the choir on all this, but just as a point, just to bring it home, literally, it's from beam to basement. So anywhere moisture could be a problem throughout the entire house. Where you have moisture, you often have mold or the potential mold problem. You have different kinds of large mechanical elements in the home that produce ozone or chemicals or fumes like heaters, dryers, even microwaves produce a certain amount of ozone byproduct. Cars, if you have a smoker in the house, you have all kinds of potential issues, not to mention the surrounding of the house. Just because the house is all locked up doesn't mean that the pollen from the grass outside or that rodents that might be outside doesn't make their way indoors. So as we all know, anywhere in the house can be a problem. And for somebody with asthma and allergies, they're advised by their doctors to look at every inch of their house, particularly the bedroom, which is where we actually spend most of our time, although we're asleep then, but it's where we spend most of our time in the house, to look at each of these rooms and determine how can I eliminate the source of the trigger, and then secondly, if I can't eliminate the source, how can I minimize my exposure to that source? So next slide. And there are a lot of things people can do. So we often talk to patients and to families about low, moderate to major types of interventions in the home. And some of the low interventions have some of the biggest impact. So just integrated, we all know about integrated pest management, but we also advocate integrated pet management. You know, simple things like just keeping your dogs and cats off the bed, because through some science we've done, we know that dust mites actually feed on animal dander and moisture. So having your dogs and cats sleep on the bed when you're at work actually is feeding the dust mite problem, literally. You know, changing out your bedding frequently and washing it. So some simple low-cost things can be done to have some major impact, all the way up to more major types of changes. Some people simply have to remove mold-ridden wallboard they may have, or fix cracks or leaks in their foundation. Removing, certainly in some cases, removing asbestos from old houses, but also removing formaldehyde-laden other constituents and materials that might have gone into building the house. So everywhere, and there's a lot of stuff in between as well. So essentially, we advise patients and sort of their doctors that it's through a multiplicity of these things, not just one, but it's through a lot of these things together that whether you're building, whether you're outfitting, whether you're remodeling, or whether you're maintaining your home, it's a combination of all these things that really starts to have a major impact. Next slide. So what we've done here at the foundation to try to help is we created a program about 8 years ago to help manufacturers improve how they produce products that are specifically targeted to the asthma and allergy population, and we assess them to determine, based on certain criteria, if they are quote-unquote asthma and allergy friendly, whether it's materials or a finished product. But it also is a way for us to help consumers find products that meet their unique needs. And we call it our asthma and allergy friendly certification program. Unfortunately, there's no legal or medical definition to the term hypoallergenic, even though it's used so frequently. So we're trying to help educate consumers and industry so that somewhere in the middle they can meet up with some great products and be satisfied. Patients can be satisfied that they can meet their needs to reduce their exposure to allergens. Next slide. And this is just an illustration of, we actually have standards for 27 different types of products, again, that range from all over the house. And we can go to the next slide. And the standards that we've created with our lab partner, who called Allergy Standards Limited, it's a allergist-run scientific organization and certification body, includes a lot of, with 27 different standards, you can imagine we're looking at very different things for a pillow, for example, than we are from a vacuum cleaner. Very different kind of standard, but nonetheless, the way we assess whether or not something's asthma and allergy friendly falls nicely into sort of 3 phases. One is just looking at the materials that the particular product is made from. In the case of flooring, for example, we want to know what are the constituent chemicals and materials that go into the actual manufacture of that product. What is it made of? But then secondly, we want to know how does it actually behave in chamber testing, how does it behave in its packaging, what are the how is it installed, because even though it may be a fantastically low VOC, really asthma and allergy friendly product, if it's laid down with VOC, high VOC adhesives, we know that in the end, from the consumer's point of view, it still doesn't meet their needs. And then third, the allergen assessment is something unique we do. It's not just good enough to put good stuff in a building, but it has to be maintained so that you can keep on bringing it down to an asthma-friendly state. So we test, in the case of flooring, how much does allergen accumulate on that floor? Does the flooring type actually promote mold growth, or is it mold resistant? Can the allergen be removed through common household cleaning, for example? So that's the kind of assessment that we do, and flooring is just one example of that. Next slide. And then I'll end it on, so what are some of the challenges then for the patients? Well, some of the challenges are opportunities. So with the emergence of the green mentality, it's a very positive evolution that over the past many years, this idea of recycling and putting in green materials and in green building is a great direction to go in, but unfortunately it is somewhat confused with the term healthy, because not all green is necessarily healthy, and vice versa. Particularly for the allergy patient, a very green type of cleaning product, for example, would be some organic type of cleaning spray that might use tea tree oil, which happens to be a very good surfactant and a replacement for a lot of chemicals in cleaning products. But for somebody who has allergies to that type of protein, tea tree oil is not healthy. So that's just one example of where for people with allergies or with asthma, green doesn't always mean healthy. So it's a challenge to make sure people understand and look for the right things for them. And then just one other example of a challenge is, maintenance, living in multi-unit dwellings. A lot of Americans, particularly in the urban area where asthma is quite prevalent, don't live in a single-family homes. They live in a condo building, they live in an apartment building, and a lot of these remediations are out of their control. They can't change their flooring, they can't change their HVAC system, or their neighbor down the hall is a smoker. So that presents some challenges for families who are most at risk for asthma and allergies. But for the most part, most Americans can do something to help reduce their exposure to allergens, and it all starts really with great building design. I think that. And then the last slide, any resources we have on our website are free, so you're certainly welcome, and certainly welcome to direct others that may be interested to our free guide about how to reduce asthma and allergy triggers at the home on our website. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. Our next presenter is Allison, and she will be talking some about the built environment. Allison?
Thank you. So we were all asked the question, what do people-friendly spaces mean to you? And in designing people-friendly spaces for healthcare, we look at the environment of the impact of the entire environment on its occupants. We approach our projects with a comprehensive approach, and we team to look at all aspects of that environment, lighting, finish, planning. We're planning for an environment to have a positive impact on its occupants. So some of that is connections to outdoors, accommodating families, providing areas of respite for caregivers and patients. We also utilize lessons learned by evidence-based design, such as views for patients, handrail placement, looking at safety factors, path of travel. And lastly, we specify responsibly. And by that, I mean that we select products that are sustainable in terms of green attributes, but also sustainable in terms of our clients' ability to maintain them over time. Next slide. So the built environment has a number of hidden toxins in virtually every surface. In looking at this image of healthcare, an inpatient room for a project in Kuwait, I outlined some of those potentials. Casework, things like formaldehyde, VOCs, toluene. Things like in lighting, we know we've got toxins across the fixtures that are widely available, including things like mercury, and even in the fixtures that have longer life, we still have issues to work on there. Ceiling tiles can contain PVC and formaldehyde. Flooring has the potential to contain PVC and phthalates. And caulks and sealants, at this point, are still an evolving issue. The very thing that makes them pliable is what makes them off-gas for the duration of their life. Next slide. So in breaking this down and looking at each of the systems of the built environment, we try to have the largest impact that we can. We are at this point starting to use, for lighting, fixtures with a longer life cycle. As LED products become more widely available, and we know that they're going to give our end users upwards of a 10-year lifespan, we're starting to see that, and this is an acute care environment that's showing some LED lighting in place. Ceilings also have some low VOC options that are now available. There's actually products with no urea formaldehyde added to it. There's some interesting products that have claims about cleaning air and filters on the back side of the ceiling tile. And there's also the choice, if you can afford it, when we're able to get wood veneer products in on the ceiling, we now have the availability to switch those over to green cores, which we're actively doing. Next slide. So there's many choices for flooring, and certainly some things to look out for when making some of those choices. When looking at the moisture barrier products that are the backed carpet tiles, it's important to check the manufacturer's information on the backing. There are now some PVC products available for those backing systems. Careful use of carpet and backing systems in healthcare, though. Products without the backing will allow liquids to reach the slab. So we really need to match that use of product to the use of the space. When specifying resilient products, the number of PVC-free products are expanding. Check the product specifications carefully, although binders used in some of those do contain VOCs. Adhesives have moved to latex, which is positive for green attributes, but this has led to some other issues for us. The waiting area that's pictured here shows a PVC wood look plank and use of rubber flooring outside of that area. You can see two products that are imaged here. What's nice for the end user is that both of these products are available with water-based maintenance. So that's been something that we've been trying to consider when we look at products for the acute care environment. Ease of maintenance and removing the cleaners from the equation has been big for us. Next slide. When looking at millwork, the choices, there's some clear choices in terms of specifying green. We specify particle board that contains no added urea formaldehyde and zero formaldehyde adhesives. Again, in terms of sealants and caulks, there are still some issues that remain there in terms of pliability. The very thing that makes them pliable over time will also make them a long-term issue for off-gassing. Interesting to note for stains and paints, even if the base is a no VOC product, the tints are not. So the deeper the tint, the more of a VOC impact you're having, although this does not impact the LEED checklist. Next slide. So in healthcare, there's some good news that plastic wall covering, which is a commonly used element for a number of us, has moved to no PVC products. Bad news, the contact adhesives routinely used to install the products are still an issue. In terms of other wall coverings, we're not currently specifying decorative wall coverings in healthcare. Should you choose to do so, careful consideration of placement is very important. Locating these on an exterior wall creates a vapor barrier and the potential for mold and mildew behind them. As far as paints, low VOC products are now available across a wide variety of manufacturers. Next slide. We have finally moved away from VCT flooring in healthcare environments. which is great news. Great news for comfort, great news for maintenance over time. We've got a lot of choice of resilient products that offer choices of alternative maintenance protocols and green attributes. And our clients are beginning to explore these alternatives with us. The old-fashioned VCT installation had 6 layers of finish between traffic and the wear layer of the flooring. For some products, we're now walking on the wear layer. And I think there's still a question there. How will these products perform over time? In some of our most challenging acute care environments, we are moving to rubber flooring for a number of these. Next slide. So challenges. Since the introduction of latex-based adhesives, there have been a number of challenges. Our projects are moving at a faster pace. Lightweight concrete is routinely used, and the timeline for drying of slabs is tight. Given the tight timelines, if budget permits, application of a moisture barrier has sometimes been a necessary step prior to installation of finished floor. Planning ahead is certainly key to mitigating risk. Healthcare environments utilize a lot of flooring that tends to be unforgiving in terms of moisture. The potential impacts include delamination and bubbling, and these are not only a danger in terms of slip and fall, there's a financial impact that represents certainly a lot of downtime for our clients if there's a need for follow-up and repair. So with that, I conclude.
Thank you so much, Allison. We really appreciate it. Our next presenter will be Sandy. So, Sandy, thank you.
So as Allison mentioned, we were tasked with the question, what does people-friendly mean to me? So in thinking about that, it really comes to light that through proper design, we enable the built environment to perform on all levels. But as a healthcare designer, my key focus is to keep the occupants healthy and safe while doing so. So by improving indoor air quality, we really do address the question, what does people-friendly mean? It works in the full circle that's there. It's got to do with the human, which is the patient, the caregivers, the family members, the facility as a whole, and the organizational structure to be able to keep that building operating all the way through. So by reducing toxins and emissions in the materials that we specify, we're fostering the built environment, its occupants, the community that surrounds it, as well as the environment as a whole. Next slide. So the image here shows some places where toxins are hidden, and Allison alluded to that in some of her discussions, so I won't reiterate that. But let's take a look at how you actively address this on your projects. Patients are in the hospital due to injury and illness, so it's our responsibility in the design community to not place any additional burdens on their bodies. By reducing the toxins in the materials and the furnishings that we specify, we therefore foster human health. We may not think about it, but chemicals are present in nearly everything we touch in the air we breathe. And unfortunately, many of these chemicals are known carcinogens. So I feel that the design industry is uniquely positioned to take on this leadership role, and I think they're doing a great job in doing so. We're slowly moving away from specifying products with toxins. That in turn is sending a signal to manufacturers that toxins in the built environment are no longer going to be tolerated. And by using this knowledge and educating our end users and educating maybe our junior designers coming up through the firm, we can then use that to make intelligent and safe product selections. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at the challenges that designers face when addressing indoor air quality and people-friendly design. I think we owe a big thank you to the dedicated efforts of a lot of our product manufacturers out there and their fabrication process, and therefore these challenges are slowly diminishing. When the EPA Chemical Concern List was released back in December of 2009, the manufacturers recognized that many of the chemicals listed there were additives that they routinely used in their products. There's just a few of them listed here, and it shows where we use them and where they're found in products. But what was the driving force behind this? Really, it was 3 things. There was a societal pressure to eliminate the toxins from the manufacturing process because those toxins were filtering into the air and into the water. And animal testing has shown that those toxins were found in fish and in birds. And then the human bioburden, the level of testing has shown that those chemicals are absorbed and retained in our bodies for long periods of time. So if we pick out just a few of these, if we look at the PBDEs, the polybrominated diphenyl ethers, and the PFCs, the perfluorinated chemicals, those are they're heavily used in the fabrication and the finishing process. They're used as performance attributes, mostly, at least from my point of reference, in the healing environment, because these chemical additives help us attain stain resistance, flame retardancy, and antimicrobial properties. If we look at phthalates, phthalates are a plasticizer. It's a chemical additive that's used in plastics, and that's actually what makes it pliable. These phthalates are absorbed and inhaled, and unfortunately they don't permanently bind to PVC, so they migrate into our air, our soil, and our water. PVC, which is polyvinyl chlorine, it's a chlorinated plastic used in vinyl. 90% of phthalates used today in the chemical process are found in vinyl. So PVC emitting chemicals, they do it throughout their entire life cycle. So we really need to start looking to phthalate free, which means that there's no PVCs at all. Next slide, please. So if we take a look at the furniture and the materials and what our manufacturers' goals are and their industry trends, we have to recognize the fact that furniture is no longer a commodity because of the use of chemicals in these products that end up in our environment. The chemicals listed here on the slide represent just a few that the product manufacturers are striving to remove from their products. These furnitures and materials, we really need to view them as a direct touch surface, one where toxins are accumulated, therefore they become ingested and they become inhaled. And the emissions of these toxins into the environment over the life cycle plays a vital role in furniture and materials and overall the health and wellness of the occupants within the space. Next slide, please. So what can we do to promote indoor air quality in the built environment? Within furnitures, within our materials, you need to research your product specification attributes. Be aware of what's actually in there. Modify your specification and procurement practices within your firm based on those findings. And more importantly, educate your end users and help increase the awareness there. Next slide. Many manufacturers are trying to be green. And they're doing that because they've learned things, they're changing things, they're eliminating things in their processes. One of the big things that the manufacturers in the furniture industry have done is they've created water-based finishes. So in doing so, they're reducing the VOCs that are emitted into the air. They're working tirelessly to eliminate PVCs and phthalates from their process. They're also using third-party certification, and I think this has played a key role in a lot of these changes that we've seen in the industry over the last 3 to 5 years. And what that does is it keeps the manufacturing process honest and gives them a yearly recertification process, and that third-party certification is something that we as designers can trust. Next slide, please. I can't speak about furniture without speaking about fire barriers. HFRs, which are halogenated flame retardants, are also a performance attribute. They're used to inhibit flame spread, and they're released slowly over the life of the material. There's actually 3 types of commercial PBDEs, which are, as we mentioned before, are polybrominated diphenyl ethers, which are flame retardants. There's decabromes, pentabromes, and octobromes. The penta and octobromes have been mostly phased out of the process. Decabromes have been banned and will be completely eliminated by December of 2013. In Boston and in other select geographic areas, I speak to this because we have to address California Technical Bulletin 133 here, which requires the use of chemically laden fire barriers in order to meet this code. So by introducing these chemical compounds into the environment that are containing chlorine and bromine, which are both known carcinogens, it really compromises what we believe to be the green piece of furniture that we're putting within the space by having to place this fire barrier on it. Next slide. So how can our industry be an advocate when it comes to this toxicity and barriers? We need to start requesting that the manufacturers out there use green barriers. That means a non-halogenated barrier, which contains no PBDEs and no HFRs. Unfortunately, there is no industry standard. Manufacturers do their own testing, and therefore they select their own barriers. So it's the design industry's responsibility to make these manufacturers just aware how the barriers are affecting the indoor air quality as their furniture manufacturing process was. Next slide, please. So in my mind, to sum it up, people-friendly really means to be an advocate. We need to challenge the industry to provide this function without compromising the environment or human health. We need to provide our end users with the best products possible to help support indoor air quality. And I'm thankful that many manufacturers are listening, as well as procurement power players out there. And there's numerous professional resources that are available to us as a tool. There's the Green Guide for Healthcare, Healthcare Without Harm, Center for Health Design, Pharos. So you can use these to help educate yourself and help move forward in selecting the right products. So how do we resolve this challenge? By working to support the manufacturers of products who reduce the VOCs, both in content and emissions from their products. And again, there's numerous certification entities out there that we can look to, which are these third party that I spoke to, as far as Green Guard for Children in Schools, which is the most stringent of the Green Guard guidelines, Floor Score, Green Seal, Cradle to Cradle, etc.
Great. Thank you so much, Sandy. Next up, we've got Juliet Spoker. Juliet.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Next slide, please. So, along with all of my colleagues here today, we were all asked, as was said, to address what does a people-friendly space mean to you. And to me, people-friendly spaces are spaces that appeal to all of the senses of the inhabitants. They should look beautiful. They should help to connect people back to the natural environment. They need to serve their purpose well, calm or excite as is appropriate, and most of all, do no harm to the inhabitants or to the environment, to our natural environment. I'm focusing a lot of my part today on the discussion about the process of bringing people together to achieve the best possible result. While the evidence is clear about the risks of hazardous materials in the built environment, the process of weeding out all of the potential materials is a combined effort of the client, the designer, the contractor, and all of the manufacturers that we partner with in order to get this done. We need to also look at the materials themselves, the process of the manufacturing, how things are installed, how things are maintained, and really the whole life cycle of the materials in the buildings that we produce. Next slide, please. I like to think about organizing the effort around sort of 4 key concepts. Alignment of the team is very, very important at the beginning to make sure that all of the project goals are understood, that each of the parameters are clear to all members of the team. That would include the client, every member of the architectural team, the engineers, contractor, product manufacturers, furniture manufacturers, really all parties involved so they can act as a steward for their own piece of the project. And periodically, you know, this alignment needs to be realigned or adjusted. There needs to be touchstones throughout the process to make sure that as parameters may change, that the goals are still kept and held. Working with the values of your clients, we need to really understand what is most important to them. What are the environmental goals to the project? What does it mean overall for the length of the building, the health of the occupants, the purpose of the entire project? They may be interested in the highest level of indoor air quality that they can achieve, but may have some schedule issues, budget issues that will be a factor in decisions. And understanding what those are, and again, getting everyone in alignment, it really helps with decisions as you move through the process. I think starting early as is possible, you know, it's part of, at times, very often in the even interview and proposal process, but really even in a kickoff, keep going with it, green charrettes, sustainable workshops with as many constituents as possible is the best way to get buy-in. And employ the precautionary principle to use the best scientific evidence and knowledge and make decisions based upon that. I think, let's say if you want to replace a bottle with a non-toxic alternative. So you get an alternative and the science is correct, then you're safe. If you get an alternative and the science is wrong, then you're safe as well. But if you get an alternative and the science is, if you do not get an alternative, I'm sorry, and the science is correct, then you're not safe. Next slide, please. I think we need to all understand the challenges of our project and the various sort of pieces that we need to work through as we're beginning to take an idea all the way through completion and fruition and beyond. And some of these may be a legacy of materials that have been used in a facility before, that have known performance attributes that the client is used to and understands. It may be certainly a client's maintenance practices and a willingness to change. This comes back into sort of knowing how many challenges your client may have, and also involving constituents, particularly maintenance people, that will want to understand, how their processes may need to change over time in order to manage some of the more sustainable products. I think cost considerations, upfront costs, longevity of a product is extremely important. We talk about potential return on investment in the form of reduced maintenance costs, but it may also be that a product specifically lasts longer and is more durable over time, therefore would not need to be changed out as frequently. Certainly aesthetics, also material comfort underfoot. The notions, particularly in a hospital environment, of reduced footfall noise are also characteristics that can challenge the appropriateness of a material. So again, some of my colleagues here today mentioned the notion of the appropriate material choice for the appropriate application. I mean, that's sort of one of the most critical things, I think, because if it's the appropriate material, then it's going to stay stuck down and used over a long period of time, as opposed to having a failure because it's improperly specified. Next slide, please. I think, the solutions to many of these challenges, as I've mentioned earlier, is to involve as many stakeholders as possible. Workshops, presentations, even mock-ups and installations that people can try out as much as possible to involve everyone, bring people along and have them support it together. I think at the end of the day, the most successful projects really are involving so many of the people in the decision-making process, or people that would traditionally be part of that process become engaged and feel as though they're contributing to the overall and will really support these ideas moving forward. That we've mentioned earlier, to take an evidence-based approach that prove what you're saying through scientific evidence, specification and certification data, test results. There are case studies, post-occupancy studies, and references from other clients that are using the materials that you're proposing. We like to ask for as much transparency from manufacturers as we can for materials and processes, and we continue to support those manufacturers that are open with the information, even if it's not 100% there yet, if they're on their way toward working through something that may be a durability issue and they're trying to pull chemicals out of their project, out of their various products. I think the idea is to be supportive, to support progress, and work for change overall. So thank you.
Thanks, Juliet. Next up, we've got Diane Martel. Diane?
Good afternoon. On this question of people-friendly spaces, to me, many of the other panelists really synthesized the essence of what I believe. But the most important part for me is to ensure the health and well-being of people in spaces, whether residential or commercial, and really give a safe environment for these people to live in. So what is indoor air? Well, we've talked about air, and certainly as in our generation and 20 or 30 years ago, there was very little question of what is air, what is the quality of the air. But today, it's really focusing on the word quality much more than anything else. And it's the air quality within and around the buildings and structures. And I think Mike Tringle from the AFA really made a point on the triggers and the problems that could occur in a home as well as around the home. So according to the EPA, it's really a top risk today to public health. Change the slide. Next. So we've been talking about buildings and certainly the impact of the buildings on the emission levels and the energy used today. As you see, buildings are really responsible for 30 to 40% of the energy used, and as well as 33% of the CO2 emitted. With the fact today that we are trying to seal the buildings, make them more energy efficient, does have an impact on indoor air quality. Simply due to the fact that we are looking at a sealed space and we have no indoor air, outdoor air exchange in a normal way, as we had leaking buildings before. There's no choice into sealing these buildings. We really need to reduce our footprint on energy and certainly carbon emissions. So what does that do to the indoor air? It's now relying on HVAC systems as well as extremely low emitting materials used within the facility or within the home. Next. So I won't speak again about what all of the parts and pieces of what can be emitting in a space, but there's certainly emissions coming from the paints, from the floor, from the furniture, and from the chemicals kept to clean the floor, and an array of potential hazards in a facility. We're looking at 40% of all our homes and buildings are sick today. I always think of planes as having bad indoor air, but there's a large portion of our homes and office buildings that have worse air than airplanes. And 2 million people die prematurely because of bad indoor air quality. So it's something that we cannot live without. Air is essential to our life, but certainly the quality of it affects us in the diseases we get, whether allergies, asthma, any other respiratory problem that we can have due to bad indoor air quality. Turn. Next. So a little bit of stats here on 1 out of 5 Americans have asthma and or allergy. 7.7% of children have asthma. 55% test positive for 1 or more allergies. And we have 2 million people over 65 that have asthma. So when the buildings no longer breathe, the emissions stay trapped inside and become factors that really have a big impact on the health and well-being of people in spaces. Turn. So obviously Tarkett sells flooring, and I'll talk about flooring. To me, flooring is a system. And ASTHMA and allergy-friendly certification to me makes a lot of sense, because you look at the floor not only as as the product itself, but also installation and maintenance, because all of that really is the impact of any type of surface actually in the facility, because maintenance is 80% of the cost of a product, but it's also a lot of the impact on the indoor air, daily or weekly or monthly. The maintenance has a huge impact on the indoor air quality in the life of that product and the use phase of that product. Next. So obviously use adhesives that are latex based, low VOC emissions. There's South Coast that regulates that in LEED. But certainly look at more than just South Coast. South Coast really talks about the VOCs as a weight, not emissions. So there's adhesives today that are going for Green Guard or for Floor Score. These really certifications deal with the emissions linked to the adhesives. We have spray adhesives today that actually reduce the adhesive consumption, but also have very low emissions, almost no smell, and really would make a big difference in the facility as the adhesive cures. Next. So the material itself, I think Juliet kind of talked about a little bit about the certifications. In this slide, you really see Green Guard, Floor Score. Both of them are based on California 1350. Green Guard actually will have a line on TVOCs. We'll talk about formaldehyde. It has probably more specific information on it. The asthma and allergy friendly certification is new. It's about 2 years old, but it really talks about the impact of the floor or any kind of material on the people that have asthma and allergy. It looks at the emissions. It looks at the system. Next. So again, the asthma and allergy, I won't spend a lot of time on that. It looks at basically allergenic and irritant materials and determines whether they are compatible with people living with the asthma and allergy issues. I think it's over and above that, because even if you don't have somebody in your home that does have asthma and allergy, it's important to really look at the floor or the material or the material you're using in the house to make sure that they are safe and healthy for people in those spaces. Floor Score, it's certified by SCS. It is based on California 1350 and really looks at VOC emissions. And Green Guard has a mixture of VOC and TVOC. But certainly there's thresholds on TVOCs that are established, and Green Guard for children in school is currently the threshold that is the lowest at 220 micrograms per cubic meter in terms of requirements for TVOCs, and you have to meet California 1350. Next. These certifications could be looked at in terms of a third party. They are also multi-attribute certification. Cradle to Cradle, I think most of you probably know about that. It is looking at 5 areas, and one of them being a material assessment. It is a pretty stringent. It is a pass or fail, and some of the materials today you will find with Cradle to Cradle certification. There's a version 2 that is the current one, and a new one coming out, which will be a version 3 that is even more stringent. Green Label Plus is really related to carpeting. It is a certification that looks at the carpets in terms of their life. Green Seal certification is really about the maintenance products. It is certifying maintenance products as green, and you have an equivalent in Canada called Eco Label. And both of them really talk about, looks at the LCA of a maintenance product and make sure that it is a green cleaner. Next. NSF 332 is an ANSI standard. It is an American standard. NSF is a certifying body. It is also a body that actually creates standards. So NSF 332 is a resilient certification. It looks actually from more of a loose LCA. It looks at design, materials, manufacturing. It looks at the use phase in terms of indoor air quality, in terms of maintenance, and then at the tail end, reuse, recycle. How do we recycle? Is there recycling programs existing? And then corporate governance is really about how do you treat people and, as well, the supply chain, as well as your employees. So 3 of them are here. 332 is resilient, 140 is carpet, and 336, which is the level, is furniture. Next. CHIPS is really a listing of products. And today they are actually rewriting the requirements to be part of CHIPS. So this is ongoing currently. They will require transparency as well as a minimum recycled content. So this is actually really working now. in terms of changing the CHIPS requirements for high-performance schools. Next. Maintenance. Again, maintenance is probably the area that affects your facilities the most in terms of frequency. So you really have to look at the emissions from chemicals and processes. You have to look at the polishes and strippers if you have to use one, the impact on indoor air, the impact on water. In all actuality, there's products today that require very little maintenance in terms of chemicals. Now, that doesn't mean you have to not maintain the floor, but certainly you can use water, neutral cleaner, dry buffing. There are several methodologies today that could eliminate part or all of the chemicals used to maintain. New technologies, I've seen ionized water in some machines, so the technology around maintenance will be changing, and certainly the impact on the indoor air quality is always very impactful if you use the chemicals like strippers and polishes. And in hospital facilities, obviously, low maintenance flooring really allows patients to rest and receive and recover free of noise and odor and chemicals. Next. So when you talk about reducing and alternating the kind of product maintenance, it always has a positive health and economic impact. You see here a medical center that really centered their research on finding green cleaners. They actually have custom-made natural products, and they dropped their cleaning costs 15% and improved indoor air quality for employees and patients. And I think that's really what we should all be looking at. Simple cleaning methods: sweep regularly, use neutral cleaners, mop, clean, and or dry buff. Next. So encouraging good air quality, it's really about the good materials within the floor and making sure that there is a thought process around the well-being and health of people during the product and the use phase. Next. So the checklist, you really look at the products you use in your building, the certifications attached to it. Use less emitting cleaning methods for floor maintenance like water or dry buffing, neutral cleaner. Choose products with phthalate-free plasticizers. They are right now available on the market. Low TVOC emissions, and that is important because emissions are really what is driving your indoor air quality. Use good materials that are safe and reusable, and finishes that have a positive impact. And then you look at the emission levels of everything you put in this facility, because all of these materials add up. It is not only the floor, but it's also your furniture, your ceiling, your paint. Floor score certification, Green Guard, is really measuring one material at the time, but you have to think of that whole facility as multiple products that all emit. It is a task today to figure out how to really make sure that the health and safety of people are really looked at when decisions are made on the energy efficiency, and that it complements each other. I was looking at a stat from McGraw-Hill. It shows 70% of the people that make decisions on green buildings look at energy efficiency, and only 20% look at indoor air. That is a problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. And thank you, everybody, for your great presentations. I know that we are running a little bit over on time, but we just have a few questions that have stemmed from these presentations to kind of ask our great panel. Our first question is, how well do end users understand the importance of indoor air quality? And is that something that they ask for, or do you have to educate them? Let's start with Juliet.
I think that they understand the concept, but I'm not sure they understand sort of all the components that can make up or affect the air quality. And I think once you begin to chip away at that long list, we saw so many examples in the presentation today, I think it can become a little bit sort of daunting. I think, we have challenges to educate, but also sometimes I think there's a notion, particularly when it comes to maintenance, that sort of shiny means clean, and so they want to sort of buff and polish and add layers to things because there's a perception of that sort of shiny equals clean. And so, I mean, the importance of indoor air quality, I think people understand it, but I think that we need to educate them in how to get there and how to sort of know that it's kind of a process over time, that it's not just a single install and then it's business as usual.
Great, thank you. Mike, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a great question, and keep in mind, just for perspective, the phrase end user has sort of different definitions depending on who you're talking to, right? Because to some degree, for some of us on the call, the end user is the buyer or the builder or the designer or the installer, for example. In my parlance and from my perspective, the end user is the family. And from the family's point of view, and from the patient's point of view, there's a real growing awareness of the importance of indoor air quality, and I'll also add of what causes causes good quality or bad quality. We did a survey in 2012 with Harris Interactive. It was a national telephone survey among about 1,100 adults around the U.S. And we asked them all kinds of questions about, we did it for our certification program, but in there we were asking them questions about air quality. Do they know what it is? And primarily, the question was, are you concerned about the air quality in your home? And when you just look at the general responses of, we had 1,000 of the general public and about 1,100 people who were actually asthma and allergy patients. And among the general population, 32% of them said that yes, they're concerned about the air quality in their home. Another 10% said they weren't sure. So about a third of the general population is concerned about indoor air quality. But when we looked at the responses from the asthma and allergy patients, it was 42%. So it was a much larger awareness among that key constituency that indoor air quality was of concern. And then we turned the microscope up a little bit higher and we're asking questions like, well, what do you think makes air quality? And what do you do to try to improve your air quality in your home? And it ranged from they vacuum clean more frequently, they use HEPA air filters, they wash their bed sheets, they rely on their HVAC system, but a full 13% of those people who said that they installed special flooring. So and that was up from about 5% just a few years before that in the same survey. So increasingly, from our perspective, the end user, the family, is aware that flooring has a role.
Great, thank you, Mike. Diane, as a manufacturer, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I've been in the market quite a bit, and I would say there's certainly, in the last year to two, an increased awareness of indoor air quality. I think we as people, as consumers, have seen it much more on the websites we visit. It's been more visible in the press, and I think there's an awareness that's been building. It varies a lot, though, from firm to firm. Some just require, a meeting California 1350 is enough. And some are very acutely aware of the TVOCs and the emissions, generally speaking. So I think it varies. But certainly the awareness is growing because it is a major issue in our facilities and our homes today.
Thanks, Diane. So our next question is, what are some challenges you run into when addressing indoor air quality and people-friendly spaces? Mike, what are some of the questions you're seeing, or some of the challenges you're seeing, excuse me? Sorry, anybody else?
Oh, sorry, you there? I'm sorry, I had you guys on mute. I had my voice on mute. Apologies. I said I would revert back to the slide I talked about previously, related to this little bit of commingling and confusion of the definition of what is green versus what is healthy, and because both are good things, but they don't always all the time mean the same things. And so some of the challenges are making sure the consumer understands the difference. In some cases, green means healthy for the environment, but it may or may not mean healthy for the allergic family, per se. So affordability is an issue. So for consumers, certainly a lot of the innovation and improvement in materials and in allergen or irritant reducing products in the home or constituents that help to make the home can be more expensive. So sometimes, builders or even consumers opt not to go with them because of the cost, or they forego certain kinds of remediations because they're concerned about the cost. If you've got a mold problem and you're digging behind a wall, just painting over it's not going to do it. It's really going to take a major sort of intervention to try to fix that mold problem, from fixing the material to fixing the moisture in the house and the humidity and so forth. So cost is always is another primary issue.
Thank you.
Jocelyn, could I just add something here?
Sure.
I think one of the issues is also the green cleaning products themselves. Currently, a lot of custodial people revert back to the more chemically charged cleaners because they feel they clean better. So there's a whole education and also a catch-up from the green cleaners to be as efficient as the traditional cleaners. And I think it's happening. It's just a long process. And certainly on the custodial side, it's really a training and an education to make sure that they use the proper materials, cleaners.
Thanks, Diane. So our last question, we've talked a lot about indoor air quality throughout these presentations and really focused on that aspect of creating people-friendly spaces. But what are some of the other major factors that go into the design of people-friendly spaces? Sandy, let's start with you.
Sure. I think when we talk about whether it's the built environment or the healing environment, the majority of these factors apply. We sort of here run on these 12 factors. First and foremost, it's air quality. Then we look to our flooring materials, which, as Diane mentioned, has a lot to do with your environmental services and your cleaning and your toxicity that's there. We look to the lighting levels within the space as a whole, being able to have that access to nature, whether it be through windows with natural lighting or through interior graphics to reduce the stressor levels. Also positive distractions, which really sort of ties into the healing art and the access to nature as well. The flooring materials can play into noise factors, which Juliet spoke to a little bit before. We look to, it's a standard now, but it didn't used to be, with the single patient rooms. So the overall layout of the building as a whole and the travel distances and the ergonomics that are involved for the caregivers. Wayfinding comes into play for the visiting population as well as the caregiver population. And then the arrangement of furniture within the space to be able to not only have the flexibility for environmental services to easily move the furniture to clean the area, but to be able to create these people-friendly places and mini seating areas for people to take a respite away from the patient room as a whole.
Great, thanks, Sandy. Diane, what are your thoughts?
Well, I would agree that it's multifaceted, and color, design, access to light, natural light, I think are certainly predominant in terms of creating a space that is people-centric.
Thanks, Diane. And that really concludes our session for today. We really appreciate everybody's participation, and we know we ran a little bit over, so if there are any questions that anybody submitted, we will make sure to get back to you with responses on those. Or if you have any questions that you weren't able to submit or did not get answered, you can contact me, Jocelyn Fagan, at jocelyn@functionatl.com, or Cindy Mansfield at cynthia.mansfield@target.com. For more information, you can visit targetna.com. And again, thank you so much, everybody, for your time today, and thank you to all of our panelists for your participation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.